Hi guys, this is the Casual Fan. The next stop for the F1 circus is the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in Baku. The track has given F1 fans multitude of memories in the past. This time around, F1 reaches a circuit in Baku in the entirely new generation of cars. Cars that are faster in the fast speed sections but slower in the slow speed sections as compared to the last season. We reach here with Red Bull on a roll with a 4-race win streak in the bag, and Max Verstappen leading the championship by 9 points from Charles Leclerc. Now Sergio Perez has been the talk of the town in the last week and a half with the news of him signing an extension with Red Bull for 2 more years and winning the Monaco Grand Prix. Coming into the weekend, everyone will be keeping an eye on the dynamics between the two Red Bull drivers as well, because Perez is only 15 points behind Verstappen now, and it does mean that he might play a role in the championship this season. Having said that, this weekend the teams will be at Baku in what would be the 8th race of the season. So with that in mind, let's jump straight to the preview and predictions for the 2022 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Now let me warn you, this one is a bit detailed and will be divided into multiple subsections. Now I'll add the timestamps and you can skip to the part that you are more interested in watching. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's start the preview and predictions for the 2022 F1 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Now in the first part of the preview, we will take a look at why the Azerbaijan Grand Prix is a must watch. Well, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix has been on the F1 calendar since the 2016 F1 season, and more often than not, it has delivered. Except maybe the 2019 F1 edition where the race was a bit processional at the front, every other race has been a bit of a spectacle. The 2016 edition featured Sergio Perez score a surprise podium for Force India. The 2017 edition made Daniel Ricciardo fall in love with the city of Baku. The 2018 edition had the late race drama with Vettel going off and Bottas suffering a puncture and handing Lewis Hamilton the win. And of course, not to forget the infamous Daniel Ricciardo Max Verstappen clash. And finally, last year, we had Max Verstappen suffering a puncture from the lead, and then Lewis Hamilton destroying his restart by pressing that infamous magic button. When it comes to tracks, there is always a suggestion of looking at the track layout and its characteristics to judge how the race will be. You don't have to do that with the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Why? Because for this race, you just need to look at the track record. Baku does not deliver boring races, and you surely don't want to miss out on this one. Now, Mercedes turned the form book upside down at the Spanish Grand Prix, when Lewis Hamilton stormed through the field after his first lap clash to run as high as 4th in the race. At Barcelona, the upgrade package worked like a charm for the Mercedes as the car got rid of the bouncing effect that it suffered from the first race of the season. Not only that, the car just came alive on the straights and in the fast flowing sections of Barcelona. Now, although the gap was still pronounced in qualifying, around half a second, the race pace was quite comparable, and if we are to believe the Mercedes boss Toto Wolff, then he reckoned Lewis Hamilton could have won the race if not for the early clash with Kevin Magnussen. Now Mercedes suffered a small setback at the Monaco Grand Prix where it was caught out by the bumps on the track. At Baku, a more smoother surface and with long straights, Mercedes could be a factor, and if that happens, we might even have a 3-way fight for the win. Now, as a Formula 1 fan, that is worth keeping an eye on, isn't it? And now, most importantly, the championship battle got all the more interesting after the Monaco Grand Prix. The top 3 drivers in the championship battle at the moment, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc and Sergio Perez, have 125, 116 and 110 points on the board. There is a gap of just 15 points between the first and the third driver in the standings. What this means is that either of these 3 drivers could walk away from the Azerbaijan Grand Prix as the championship leader. And looking at the unpredictable nature of the race, it could be any one of the 3. Charles Leclerc on his part, well, he should have won the last two races, but he lost out because of misfortune and the team not doing a good enough job. Sergio Perez was the eventual winner of the Monaco Grand Prix, while Max Verstappen, well, he was somewhat on the back foot in both Spain and Monaco, but is leading the championship. Right now, it's hard to predict who will have the edge during the weekend, but it is surely going to be very interesting to keep an eye on how this unfolds. Baku has a habit of throwing a curveball in the championship. It did last season with Max Verstappen's puncture and DNF, and then later with Lewis Hamilton's restart blunder. It could do it again this time around as well, and we could see a few new surprises in the championship. After the weekend is over, could we be looking at Sergio Perez leading the championship? Or Leclerc getting back to the top? Or Max stretching his lead? The thing is, with the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, anything is possible. Now, with that out of the way, let's take a look at 5 key unanswered questions for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Number 5. Who will be the leader of the midfield? Now, the midfield does not appear to have a set pecking order at the moment. Before the Monaco Grand Prix, it did appear that Alfa Romeo had cracked the code and was going to run away with things. That was turned on its head in Monaco as McLaren jumped back into contention. The track for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix has the middle sector similar to the Monaco Grand Prix layout, but the fast speed Sector 1 and Sector 3 makes things interesting. The battle for 4th is heating up between McLaren, Alfa Romeo and Alpine, and it will be interesting to see who jumps to the front out of the 3. Now sure, maybe even Haas might play a role, but I think we'll have to wait and watch how the team develops and how the car behaves, because it has been very up and down this season. Now at number 4 we have how impactful will the new regulations be in the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Now in the last few years, the track layout of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix tended to put a massive dampener on racing in the early parts of the race. In the early parts, everyone had fresh tires, and at that time, even if you are faster than the car ahead, it was next to impossible to pass the car in front. Why? Because the tight and twisty midsection of the track made it impossible to follow, and the chasing car had to drop back in second sector, because of which it could not make the pass in the third sector. Now, the new regulations should ideally make this problem go away and make it easier to close the gap in the second sector. Will this change in car characteristics help produce even more overtakes? Theoretically, yes, I think it should happen, but in reality, we will have to wait and watch. Now at number 3, we have, can Daniel Ricciardo bounce back? Well, it was a rather rude approach taken by Zak Brown to publicly call out Daniel Ricciardo, and as a result, the race in Monaco turned from bad to worse for the Australian, as he was unable to do much in the race. While the marriage between Ricciardo and McLaren is all but over, Ricciardo will have a point to prove in Baku. The Australian has had some spectacular moments at this place, with the 2017 win being one of them. The driver will be looking to draw inspiration from that and get something meaningful on the board. Can he get that done? I think we'll have to wait and watch. At number 2, we have how close will Mercedes be to the front of the grid. Now Mercedes should have a certain level of excitement heading into the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. The performance of the Spanish Grand Prix was an eye-opener. As I said earlier, the car looked fantastic and the bouncing effect was a thing of the past. And even though the peak qualifying lap was still not there, the race pace was pretty good for Lewis. At the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, it will be interesting to see how close Mercedes can get to Ferrari and Red Bull, because if the gap is still manageable, we might even see Mercedes fight with Red Bull and Ferrari at the front, and that could make things a lot more interesting for the championship in the coming days. And finally, the most important point, can Ferrari bounce back this weekend? The Azerbaijan track layout with its long straights might not be the best suited for Ferrari. However, if there is one thing that has been strikingly obvious this season, then it has been the team's ability to excel on one lap pace. Charles Leclerc has scored 5 pole positions in 7 races this season, and somewhere down the line, this comes down to Ferrari holding a distinct advantage in qualifying irrespective of the track. The Italian squad heads to Baku on the back of 4 consecutive losses to Red Bull, and with a desperate need to bounce back in the championship. Having said that, it remains to be seen if the team can get that done this weekend. Now, with that out of the way, let's switch our focus to the drivers. Drivers that have not had the perfect start to the 2022 season. Drivers that are probably under pressure to perform and show results. And more importantly, drivers that are desperate for a strong result at Baku this weekend. Now, in number 3, we have Lewis Hamilton. Now, whether he admits it or not, the fact that George Russell is 34 points ahead of Lewis, it surely bothers him. The 7-time world champion has not finished ahead of his teammate since the first race of the season, and even though some of these results were compromised by red flags, safety cars and other external interference, Russell is still on a 6-race win streak over Hamilton. Hamilton will be the first to admit that this season he's not had the best of consistency. He has blown hot and cold, while Russell, on the other hand, has been relatively consistent over the period. At the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Hamilton will be hoping to set the record straight and get one over his teammate, especially for his own confidence and the team's as well. Now at number 2, I have Mick Schumacher. Mick Schumacher had 2 major issues early in the season that needed to be taken care of. The first was his comparative lack of performance as compared to Kevin Magnussen. The second was his ridiculously expensive crashes he used to have in the car. The crash in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix costed the team close to $1 million in damages, and for a team like Haas, that's a lot of money. Ever since, Mick Schumacher has surely made strides in terms of performance. He is more or less, probably a match for Kevin Magnussen in terms of performance. But the problem is the crashes. The crash at the Miami Grand Prix not only caused the team in terms of damage, but it also cost Mick Schumacher a championship point. To make things worse, the Monaco Grand Prix crash was almost a replica of what happened at Saudi, where the car broke in half and the team had to incur a lot of expense in terms of damages. Now, Haas team boss Gunther Steiner, his patience seems to be wearing thin after every disappointment from the German. And at Baku, for Mick Schumacher, it's about time he started showing a level of performance and maturity that he should be able to display after all that he has done in his junior career and after all the expectations people have from him. Now at number 1, I don't think it is much of a surprise, but at number 1 we have Daniel Ricciardo. When Zak Brown went public with his feelings about Daniel Ricciardo's performance at McLaren, in effect he started a slow process of a rather tardy split between McLaren and Daniel Ricciardo. Ricciardo was not too happy with those comments, and it was quite obvious even in the press conference. And one of the reasons is because the Australian has been very vocal about his struggles and has been very critical of his own performance in the media. He didn't need Zak Brown to go out and publicly diminish his image. That is something you don't expect from a team principal or a boss especially. Right now for Ricciardo, the next few races are nothing but an audition of what he can do in a Formula 1 car more than anything else. His time at McLaren, in all probability, something I even touched upon earlier as well, in all probability his marriage with McLaren is over, and after the 2022 F1 season, I feel both the parties are going to look for a different solution. But for Ricciardo, if he is looking to further his career in Formula 1, he needs to show that he is still a capable driver. That audition for securing his future in F1 starts in Baku this weekend, and the Australian would be desperate to string together a strong result this weekend. Now, after looking at the drivers, let's take a look at the teams. Let's take a look at the teams that will be desperate for a strong result, especially because there are multiple teams on this grid who have not had a season that they expected. There were a lot of expectations, there was a lot of hype as well, but some of the teams have not been able to live up to it. On the other hand, there are teams that are going through a rut and they are desperately looking to find a way out of it and get back to a more positive string of results. Now, without further ado, let's take a look at the top 3 teams that would be desperate for a strong result this weekend. At number 3, we have Aston Martin. That massive overhaul of an upgrade brought by Aston Martin in the Spanish Grand Prix, well, it has proven to be a bit of a dud for now. The race in Barcelona did not yield any points for the team. And while Vettel did drag the Aston Martin into points in Monaco, the lack of speed was quite evident. Aston Martin feels that this concept, it is basically a copy of Red Bull's 2022 F1 Challenger, it has the potential to shoot the team up the pecking order as compared to the previous Challenger. If that is the case, and if Aston Martin is hoping to salvage something from this season, then the Azerbaijan Grand Prix has to be the first race where it starts to show a competitive midfield pace. Why? Because if the package cannot unlock more performance 3 races into its introduction, then the major overhaul for the team might just have been a waste of time altogether. At number 2, we have Mercedes. Now Mercedes is more than 100 points behind Red Bull in the championship standings. The challenger from the German giant was just not good enough at the start of the season and has fallen back significantly in terms of points. However, the Spanish Grand Prix provided a glimmer of hope that Mercedes could salvage something meaningful from this season. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the car was very strong in the race trim, and if it wasn't for Hamilton's first lap crash, the race could have turned out to be very interesting for Mercedes. At the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Mercedes knows it is ideally, in the best case scenario, still a major upgrade away from challenging at the front. But if the team can replicate the race pace from the Spanish Grand Prix, we could be looking at a very strong race from the German outfit. Now, keeping this in mind, and the fact that it is still 100 points behind Red Bull, Mercedes will be desperate to start putting things together this weekend and maybe, if possible, not let Red Bull run away and extend its lead in the championship even more. Now, after Mercedes in number 2, we have Ferrari in number 1. Now, the team finds itself in a familiar position this season, similar to what it found itself in 2017 and 2018. Where the early season advantage the team had was overcome by Mercedes and Ferrari had no answer for it. This season, after the first 3 races, everything looked fantastic. But post-Australian Grand Prix, everything has changed. Red Bull has gained momentum while Ferrari has been unable to keep up. To make things worse, Ferrari lost 2 races in Barcelona and Monaco that it should have actually won. Riding on a 4-race losing streak, Ferrari is desperate for a win, because if it doesn't, the Red Bull momentum will get completely out of hand. At the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Ferrari needs a win, and it needs it badly. Okay, now after talking about the drivers and the teams, let's take a look at the track as well. The track at Baku is unique, as it demands not only a great car in the slow speed sections, but it also demands high speed efficiency as well. Because of the long straights in S1 and S3, in contrast to the tight and twisty sections in second sector. Because of the long straights in sector 1 and sector 3, in contrast to the tight and twisty sections of sector 2, the teams have to strike a compromise in terms of going after the straight line speed as well as efficiency in the slow speed sections. More often than not, it is this compromise that results in great wheel-to-wheel action between cars opting to run different setup philosophy. Okay, now with that, the preview part of this video is done and dusted. Now we will proceed to the predictions part, and I've divided the predictions part into 2 subsections. The first section is where we make the pecking order predictions, and the second subsection is where we make the predictions about the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Now when it comes to prediction, first of all, let's try to give my view on what I feel would be the pecking order for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Now in number 10, we have Williams. In terms of backmarkers, Williams appears to have lost ground to the midfield since the start of the season. In the first few races, Alex Albon had shown a capability to punch above the car's weight to an extent and drag results out of the car. He even scored 2 points finishes with that car in the first 7 races. But in the last couple of races where teams have brought upgrades, even in qualifying Williams appears to have dropped further behind, and at Baku, I feel Williams should again be the slowest team on the grid, just like it has been through the entire season. Now at number 9, I have Aston Martin. Well, Aston Martin is a bit of a mystery because in the hands of Sebastian Vettel, it is producing completely different set of results as compared to Lance Stroll. Overall, the new mega upgrade package that was brought at the Spanish Grand Prix has not worked. Vettel did secure a Q3 slot and a point in Monaco, but it did appear that it was more of a case of the driver than the car pulling out that result. Aston Martin, at least in my view, it should be the second slowest car at Baku. At number 8, I have Haas. Now Haas has been a bit of a hit and miss this season. Magnussen pulled off a surprise result in Bahrain, but after that there have been races where Haas has done well, and then in others where it has somewhat faded. In the last couple of races, one thing that is evident is that even though the drivers have been able to pull a lap time out of the car, the race pace is just not there at the moment to fight at the front of the midfield. For Baku, considering the team's fading race pace, it should be the 8th fastest car on the grid. Now that's just my view. Again, as I said, Haas is a bit of a hit and miss. They might even surprise everyone once again this weekend. In number 7, I have AlphaTauri. Now AlphaTauri is a bit of a wild card this weekend. Now if you had paid attention to Monaco, that car was blisteringly quick in Monaco's practice sessions but just could not replicate that in the race or in qualifying. Looking at the track characteristics, AlphaTauri's speed in Monaco should help the team in the middle sector of the track. However, the car also lacks aerodynamic efficiency of the other cars, because of which it might be compromised in the first and third sector. I guess we'll have to wait and watch, but for now, I'm placing AlphaTauri as the 7th fastest car for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Now in number 6, I have Alfa Romeo. Alfa Romeo was in a league of its own at Barcelona and Miami, but it hit a roadblock in Monaco where the track did not suit the car as well. While the middle sector could be a concern for Alfa Romeo, the first and third sector could play in the hands of the car, and from 4th to 6th fastest cars, it will be hard to find too much of a gap. Considering the setback phase at Monaco and its similarity to the middle sector in Baku, I'm placing Alfa Romeo as the 6th fastest car this weekend. Now in number 5, I have Alpine. Overall, Alpine is a decent car, but it's not extraordinary in any of the facets. While this means that it loses time to the top teams at every part of the track, it also means that it is very competitive in the midfield as well. Now in my view, I expect Alpine to be the 5th fastest team this weekend, although the gap to the 4th fastest team, it might not be that much, and you could see them switch positions during the race and even in qualifying as well. Now in number 4, I have McLaren. McLaren had a stumble at Miami and Barcelona because those tracks once again exposed how the car might be strong in some areas. It is still not as efficient in others. For Baku, however, the track plays perfectly to the strengths of McLaren. The long straights have already been McLaren's strengths, and the Monaco type slow speed section where McLaren has showed that it can excel, it should help the team hold some advantage over the other cars in the midfield. Expect McLaren to be at the front of the midfield battle, but to be fair, it's going to be very close between McLaren, Alpine and Alfa Romeo. Now in number 3, unsurprisingly, I have Mercedes. Now this is one team that is worth keeping an eye on this weekend. As I said earlier, the performance in Barcelona, especially the race pace, was quite impressive. Can we expect Mercedes to get even closer to Ferrari and Red Bull? Maybe not, but again, in a clean weekend where there are not too many incidents, it might be interesting to see what Mercedes can do with respect to Ferrari and Red Bull in a straight shootout. Now in qualifying, I don't see too many changes happening, but it's the race pace that I'm interested in, and I want to see if both Lewis and Russell can pull off a surprise and maybe challenge the second drivers at Red Bull and Ferrari this weekend. Now in number 2, I have Ferrari. Ferrari might rue the lost opportunities to win in Monaco and in Barcelona because the track at Baku should favor Red Bull. The tight and twisty midsection is going to help Ferrari close the gap to Red Bull, but Red Bull's supremacy on the straights and the fast speed sections is going to benefit them big time. While in qualifying, I once again expect Charles Leclerc to pull off another pole position because of Ferrari's ability to have a strong one-lap pace. Over the race, I feel it's going to be once again Red Bull holding an edge over Ferrari in terms of race pace. Now with that out of the way, no surprises here, as at number 1, the only team remaining, we have Red Bull. As mentioned earlier, Red Bull should hold the edge on this track. The car has visible straight line speed advantage pretty much over everyone else on the rest of the grid, except maybe Mercedes if it hooks everything up. While the single lap pace is still not Red Bull's strength, its race pace should cover up whatever distance it loses in qualifying. So yeah, this weekend Red Bull should be the car to have, and unless something completely weird happens, or there is rain, or there is entirely different behavior from the tires, expect Red Bull to lead from the front. So now this was the pecking order predictions for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and now we get to the real stuff. Now we get to the bold predictions for the race in Baku. And well, talking about that, last season, how realistic did it appear that Sergio Perez will win the race? Not much, isn't it? And how realistic was it to see Daniel Ricciardo in 2017 crash his car in qualifying, start the race in 10th, make an early pit stop, drop down to 17th, and even then win the race? The point is, when it comes to Baku, it's Christmas Day for someone special. Other than the 2019 Azerbaijan Grand Prix, which was, well, by normal Baku standards, a bit of a dud, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix has thrown up one surprise after the other in all these years. So, when we sit down to make any prediction about the race, trust me, it's bold. A straightforward race and a straightforward result in Baku is a highly unlikely possibility, and that is why when we make these predictions, we're putting our neck on the line, because more than likely they will be wrong. So without further ado, let's jump straight to it and dish out our top 5 bold predictions for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Now in number 1, I have Max Verstappen is going to dominate and win the race. After the Monaco Grand Prix, there has been a lot of buzz around Sergio Perez and the fact that he beat Max Verstappen over a weekend for the first time at Red Bull. Perez won the race while Max Verstappen was third. Now all the praise is well deserved, and it is hard to ignore that Perez is only 15 points behind Max in the championship. But there have been many pundits that have probably gone a bit overboard with suggestions that Perez could even be a championship contender this season. To an extent, it's not wrong to give props to Perez for the level of performance that he has shown this season. He has been more or less there or thereabouts when it comes to the ultimate pace of the car. But while it's completely justifiable to say that Sergio Perez has upped his game, all this talk around his teammate is only going to fire up Max Verstappen. The Red Bull driver is arguably the best driver on the grid at the moment. And lest we forget, Sergio Perez, with all his improvements, still took 7 races to beat Verstappen for the first time. The track layout for Baku favors Red Bull over Ferrari with its long straights. The Dutch driver has been a bit off color in the last couple of races. Neither Barcelona or Monaco were Verstappen's absolute best performances this season. At Baku, expect the reigning champion to make a statement, as he will not only win the race, but dominate his teammate at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. In number 2, I have at least one Mercedes car will end up on the podium. Now for all intents and purposes, every pundit will be keeping a keen eye on Mercedes this weekend. The kind of transformation it showed in Barcelona, if it can put together that kind of weekend again, it might be something impressive, because although even in Barcelona, Lewis was maybe not as quick as a Verstappen or a Leclerc, his speed was still in the ballpark. And while Mercedes did struggle in Monaco, and the middle sector at Baku is going to be troublesome for the slightly unconventional Mercedes design, the car should come alive in Sector 1 and Sector 3 with all those long straights and fast speed sections. Although yes, it would be a step too far to consider either Lewis Hamilton or George Russell challenging for pole position, but is a podium out of reach? Certainly not. Expect at least one of the Mercedes drivers to be on the podium for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. And if they're not, I would actually be slightly surprised, considering their caliber and the kind of improvement the team has shown. Now in third, I have the impact of the new regulations will be more than evident at this race. Now, as I said earlier, the race at Baku, well, it has been notorious for being a bit of a slow burner at the start. It used to be case with the previous set of regulations, as the cars used to lose ground and would be too far behind by the time they reached the long straight in sector 3rd. With the new regulations, the cars are now much easier to follow. Because of this, they will not lose ground in second sector, and ultimately we can expect an increase in action in an already action-packed race. Now, to be fair, it's hard to predict exactly how much of a difference the new cars will make. But surely there is a possibility of a return to the kind of racing we saw in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Why? Because even here, after a driver is able to overtake on the long pit straight, there are sections where cars will be able to fight back after being overtaken. Now, in my view, I might be entirely wrong, by the way, this race is going to be fun. It's going to be filled with action, it's going to be filled with overtakes, and maybe some twists and turns which I cannot even predict. Now, in number 4, I have points for Sebastian Vettel, but not much progress for Aston Martin. In the last few races, we have seen Sebastian Vettel excel in punching above the car's weight. We saw that in Imola, and we saw that again in Monaco. Aston Martin has brought in a completely new design for its car. The new car, although it looks like a replica of the Red Bull, it has not shown the kind of improvement in speed that was expected. Sure, there have been reasons cited by the team, that Spain was the very first race with the car, that Monaco GP had rain making things complicated, but looking at the positions where Lance Stroll finds himself more often than not this season, it shows that the new car has not really met the expectations of the team or even the paddock. Now, the team comes back to the place of its only podium in 2021. While the hopes might be high, expect another points finish for Sebastian Vettel as he drags his Aston Martin to the points once again. But at the same time, it's very hard to expect Aston Martin to make progress and unlock a silver bullet in the third race of its new concept. Now, in number 5 and last, I have Daniel Ricciardo is going to have another disappointing race. Talking about Baku, Daniel Ricciardo loves Baku. The love affair that started with the race in 2017 is still there, but the Australian is in a precarious situation in McLaren. After the outburst by Zak Brown, it's hard to see Ricciardo continue beyond the 2022 season. At the same time, Ricciardo still needs to prove himself not only to McLaren but other teams on the grid as well. This season's struggles for Ricciardo, well, they have been a bit of a mirror image for what happened to the Australian last season. He suffered massively at Monaco in 2021. Even this time around, it was more of the same. It's just that the car characteristics in the slow speed sections is where Ricciardo is just not comfortable, and even in Baku last season, he had a tough time keeping up with Norris. This time around, Ricciardo is desperate to put on a good show at Baku. But if he is limited by the car, which he most probably would be this weekend, then he can't really do much in terms of results. And yet again, this weekend, in my humble view, we might be looking at another disappointing weekend for Daniel Ricciardo. So this concludes the preview and predictions for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. It was a bit detailed this time Took a lot of effort honestly, but I hope you guys liked it. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. Happy race weekend everyone, and see you in the next video.